Alright, the project that I'm going to show today is this top. It's an old school top. It's been around for many years, so a lot of people probably already know how to make it. But I have some little tricks that I like to use, and I think I've streamlined the operation so that everything goes a little bit quicker. So the way that it works is you take the string and you poke it through the hole so it barely starts coming out the other side, and then you just start wrapping it up. I hold the string with my thumb to keep it tight, and then just wind it up. Okay, once you get it there, we can spin it. As you can see, it spins for quite a long time. I'll just keep knocking it into the camera view. There we go. Alright, to spin it upside down, it's a little bit tricky, but it's not too hard. All I have to do is pull the string and then flick the top out really quickly before it slows down too much. Just follow it here. So there it is. And you can actually whack it and stuff, and I've had a top go all the way down the stairs and it was still spinning when it reached the bottom of the stairs. So if you get enough spin on them, they'll go for quite a long time. Okay, the layout for the top is probably one of the easiest layouts you'll ever do. First, you start out with a 2.5 by 5.5 inch block of wood, and I usually try to keep it at least 3/4 of an inch thick. This one I think is still at almost like 0.9 inches thick. Okay, the first thing you want to do is measure 3/4 of an inch over and make a line. I'll do the same thing over here. I'll just put 3/4 on the edge of the wood and then make a mark at 0. And then I'll do the same thing down on the bottom. I'll go to 3/4. I'll make a mark. I'll put 3/4 there and then make a mark at 0. Then all I have to do is draw 2 lines connecting those marks. Like that. I'll go ahead and show you a close-up of that. So 2 lines all the way down. Alright, the next step is to draw some more marks. We're going to go 1.5 inches down on both sides. So 1.5. And then 2.5. So 1.5 and 2.5. And then we just connect those lines. Okay, again, I'll show you a close-up of that. So it just looks like a cross there. But now, what we need to do is to erase this line and this line, and then this line, and this line, and this line. When we're done, what we'll have left is this pattern. The curves, to do those, all I do is take a penny, put it on top, and then just trace the penny to get the radius on there. And that will help you make it look more rounded. I like to do that on the inside of here, on the bottom there, basically every single corner except for the bottom, and then it looks like this. It's pretty easy, just 4 lines and a penny. Here is the wood after I've finished the layout. I've taken the penny and done all the curves. So again, you just need 4 lines. Alright, I've made this little fixture here to hold the piece straight up and down while it's being drilled. To make this, all I did was just take some of the exact same size blocks. So I just put 3 of them together and another one right there, and then just nailed them all together, and then let the other one fall out. Before I did that, I also cut this out with a scroll saw, and that allows the chips to fall out, so it's easier to put the next one in without having to clean it out. So all we have to do is line it up so that this drills right in the center and 3/4 of the way down. This is the first operation that we do, and goes through right here. Make sure as you're putting your piece in that you put it in with the Y first. Don't go through the handle, otherwise you're going to have to redraw that whole thing on the other side. Alright, so I have a setup, so all the student has to do is put it in here all the way, turn on the drill, and just drill all the way through. Okay, when you drill down about halfway, come back up to clear the chips, and then drill all the way through. Okay, it'll probably flare out a little bit. Make sure you slow down. If you go really fast as it breaks through the bottom, this will be a lot worse. So slow down a little bit. But don't leave the drill bit just stationary down in there spinning, because it will create a lot of heat and friction, and it'll dull the bit. So keep it moving. Okay, next I'm going to cut this out with a scroll saw. Make sure that the scroll saw is properly set up. Make sure that the teeth on the blade are pointing down. Make sure these are nice and tight. Make sure the tension on the blade up here is set to about 4, and the blade is nice and tight. It should be able to, pluck it and have it make noise. If it's too loose, it'll just flex back and forth and won't do anything. So you should be like that. Alright. Also, this guard, it doesn't have to be touching, but it needs to be down to protect your fingers. The speed should be set at about 5 at the top. There's a dial there. When cutting it out, you need to cut straight, because the blade is going to cut towards you. You have to turn your piece. Don't try to push it sideways and bend the blade to one side, because that'll just break the blade. Keep pressure down so that it doesn't bounce with the blade. you get to this point, you should move your hand back here so you won't cut your thumb. And slowly bring it around. When you're coming out, you want to slow down so the blade doesn't shoot out. Okay, next I'm just going to do those off. These outside corners, you could actually sand those into their radius as well. To cut the handle out, you need to start at the base and then work your way out here. That way you have something to hold on to when you're exiting out. If you start at the top and work your way down, then your fingers are going to be really close to where the blade is coming out. So my recommendation is, again, start from the bottom and work your way up and out. Don't use too much pressure, just let the blade do the work. And there's that cut right there. Okay, I like to round the handle. I don't like to leave it square. So I put it in a vise, then bring in a rasp, which is a really rough file, and just knock off the corners. Use light pressure because it'll hog off the wood really fast without hardly pushing on it. If you push too hard, it'll just get stuck and you won't be able to move it. So lightly, just knock off all the corners. Try not to file the table. I want to lift it up so we don't do that. Do that on all the corners and then use sandpaper to finish the job. Also use sandpaper and sanders to round all the edges and make the finished product really smooth, so when you're holding it, it's not going to dig into your hands. Okay, also I expect you to stain it or put some sort of a finish on there to protect it from oils from your hand. The demo that I had earlier did not have that, and if you rewind and look at it carefully, the wood has gotten all brown and just dingy because of people holding it, and it just gets dirty. So make sure you sand it really well after you use the file, because the file is going to leave big huge scratch marks. So sand that really well. I've had some students put finger grooves in there, so you can customize this slightly, but it still needs to do its job. To get the blanks for the tops, all you need is a 3-inch hole saw. You can use different sizes if you want, but that's the size that I like. I just use some scrap wood, and if it has pieces off the end, it's not long enough for other things. Again, I like to keep it pretty thick, almost 1 inch thick. I've already cut down into a scrap piece of wood, and that lets me know where the saw is going to cut. That way I can place this on top of that circle until it barely covers it up, and that way I know that I'm going to be cutting in the right spot. So I want to stay away from cracks and stuff like that, because you don't want your top to break apart. So sometimes the end of the wood will have cracks in it, so I'll stay away from that as well. You want to go at a really low RPM. This is running at 400. cut it, the piece stays inside. So in order to get it out, I just use a couple screwdrivers. There's some holes in there to get them in there, and just kind of wedge it out. And voila, you have your circle for the spinning part of the top. Okay, the dowel that I use for the spinning top is 3/8 of an inch. So you want to get a drill bit that's the same size. Sometimes they come a little bit bigger or smaller, and you need to get a little bit bigger or smaller drill bit to compensate, but the fit should be really tight. So we're going to drill this hole out bigger to match. When you do so, please make sure that you don't drill into the vise. I have students that don't pay attention sometimes, and that can happen, so just pay attention and that won't happen. Another thing, make sure it's flat in the vise. There shouldn't be any sawdust in there, so make sure it's clean. Same thing with underneath the clamp, and then everything will be nice and straight. So I'll put it in there, slide this in, and tighten it. But make sure that the hole is over the hole in the vise. Okay. The drill will automatically kind of move the part to center it, so you don't have to be right on the money, but at least get close. Okay, here's where we have some options. You can either just sand this down the best you can, just sand off all the burrs and stuff, and leave it, just regular circle. Or we can go to the lathe and do some design. I usually leave this up to the students. Those who are a little bit more advanced will take it to the lathe, while others who would rather not do that and just need to get caught up, we'll just leave it like this, but we'll sand and kind of round the corners a little bit. So there's those two options. I'll show you how to attach this to the lathe. Okay. Another project that I do with my students is wooden pens. So we have this mandrel here that's used a lot for those. So I decided to just find a way to use the exact same mandrel but attach this to it. I found these bushings that are for a pen kit. Can't remember which one, but there's lots of different bushings you could get. But you just got to make sure that they go from 3/8 to a larger diameter, and they just go inside, and then you can slide it onto the mandrel. Put it on the mandrel, you got to first get a couple of other bushings. So I put bushings up to here, and then the top will go right there in the center. Then I'll grab a couple more bushings and keep putting them on until I'm into the threads on the outside. A smaller one here. Now I'll put on the brass nut there, and then just tighten it down. What it's doing is it's squeezing all those bushings together and making it so that this is stuck on here. So I can still move this, so I need to go a little bit tighter until this is stuck on there, and it moves the whole assembly. Okay, so now it's pretty tight. It won't move unless I move the entire thing. You can see it moving right here. Alright, so now I bring the tailstock in, and I lock that into position. I'll also turn and bring this in as well, so that everything's nice and tight. If I turn this head should also turn with it. So now everything's turning in unison. Next, I bring the tailstock in until it's just a little bit away from the part so it won't get hit when I turn it on. I'll turn it by hand to test this, and then when I know it's in the right spot, I will lock it in position. Okay, so I'll go ahead and start turning it, and I'll use this gouge here to just true everything up. Putting it on the lathe will make the top spin a lot better because everything will get perfectly round. The hole saw isn't perfect, so if you don't do this step, your top will probably shake a little bit when it's spinning. But if you do this, it'll probably spin perfectly, and it'll just run a lot better. Okay, as you're turning on the lathe, you want to put your finger into this groove here, and that helps keep you steady. And then you bring in the chisel and you kind of hold it like this and just work it side to side. You just want to take off a little bit of the outside like I just did, and then we can start rounding the edges and doing designs on the top and the bottom. If the top stops as you're trying to cut into it, that means you will probably need to tighten this up a little bit more again. Sometimes the vibration just makes things get loose. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and turn this to the side. Make sure it's not hitting anything. And then lock it down so I can do this right here. Alright, so just did a basic pattern on here. You can be pretty creative with this process. So now I'm going to go ahead and go to the other side. And again, we move this over. Make sure it's not touching anything. Spin it. And then lock it down. Alright, after you've made a rough pattern or design, then you go ahead and start sanding. I like to use a sponge sander because it will form to any shape that you put it in contact with. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this back and out of the way. And then start sanding it. turn it off and feel how well it's doing. If you feel any rough spots, then sand on it some more. This will probably do a lot of damage to your sponge sander, so don't get the expensive ones, get the really cheap ones from like Harbor Freight. You can also turn it down so it doesn't get it so hot. You can also take sandpaper and put it on top of the sponge to help get it into the spots, into the crevices. Alright, if you take a skew and put some small grooves in there, and then take a small wire and hold it down in the groove tightly, it'll burn some stripes. Let me show you that in action here. Now you just leave those grooves as they are, or you can enhance them by burning it. I'll just put that in there. You'll see the wire gets hot and it starts burning into the wood. Okay, just like that. And voila, you got some nice design. Sand it really quick. And there you go. Now if you want to go the extra mile, you can put some friction polish on there. It's not too hard. This is friction polish right here. It's in a little bottle. All the good stuff sinks to the bottom, so you got to make sure you shake it. I have a rag. All I do is pour some on the rag, wipe it on, and then turn it on and rub it in while it's spinning. You got to create a little bit of heat, because they call it friction polish for a reason. You need the heat to dry the polish. I'm just going to put it on the rag. And I'll just rub it on the part. That's how it gets shiny. Now we turn it on and rub it on there. Make sure it gets a little bit hot. Not so hot that it burns you, but it's the friction that makes it shiny. Make sure you have a small rag. Don't use big giant ones, because the big ones have a tendency to get wrapped around the part, and then they can get dangerous. Alright, now we're done. Alright, here you see the finished top. You can decide which side you want up or down. You can spin it either way. It's up to you. For the dowel, we want to cut off 5.5 inches. You want to use either oak or birch or some other hard wood. You don't want to use soft wood because it'll just get worn out as it's spinning on the ground, especially if it's concrete or something like that. So 5.5 inches. I'll just go ahead and do that on a scroll saw. Okay, so here's a 5.5 inch dowel. Obviously you gotta put a point on it. This has been used quite a bit, so the point's been worn down a lot. This side is about what it started out as. The best way I've found to sharpen them to the point is just to use a pencil sharpener. Most pencil sharpeners will go to this big of a diameter, but I haven't seen any that go any bigger than this, so this is your limit. But make sure when you sharpen them on the pencil sharpener that you don't go to a super sharp point. Keep pulling it out and checking it, because if you just go to a really sharp point, that's just going to snap right off the first time you spin it, and you're just wasting it. I'll go ahead and sharpen this and then bring it back and show you what it looks like. As you can see, you do not sharpen it to a sharp point. You go to a dull point so that it won't break off. Okay, I went and did that to both sides because I want to be able to spin this top on the top and on the bottom. Next, we gotta drill the hole for the shaft here to put the string in. And where do we put that? Well, first you got to decide where you want the top to be placed on your dowel. Then put it into your handle. As soon as it's in the handle, then move it up just a little bit and then make a mark right there in the center. And that's where you're going to drill your hole. I like to drill the dowel when it's not connected to anything, so I take it out of the top and put it in a vise. Next, I bring a drill. The size of this drill bit is 1/8 of an inch. So this is 3/8, this is 1/8. That'll leave us quite a bit of wood left, so it should work out just right. So put it on there and drill straight down. Sometimes as the drill exits the bottom, it'll splinter a little bit. You can easily sand that to eliminate some of it. And it's ready to assemble. Alright, the dowel should have a really tight fit, and sometimes it's hard to get in there by hand. So what I do is I get a couple of blocks of wood, put the dowel on the hole, and then just hammer it down in there until you like the way that it looks. If it's too loose, you might need some glue, but usually if it's tight enough, no glue is necessary. Alright, here it is. I haven't finished it due to lack of time, but again, sand yours down a lot better than this. Here's a string. Make sure you use string that's been braided and not just twisted, and use heat to cut it, that way it won't fray. Let's give it a little test. There it goes. Now let's spin it upside down and see what happens.